The recipe we're making today is a very convenient and easy to make cheese spread from the 18th century. We'll make that today and we'll show you 3 popular ways of serving it. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking. This is a very interesting recipe. It's kind of like Cheese Whiz. It's a cheese spread made for convenience sake. This particular recipe is from Richard Briggs' 1788 cookbook, The English Art of Cookery. This recipe is not something that just shows up in Richard Briggs' cookbook, but it's a very common style of recipe all throughout the 18th century. So let's get started. Our main ingredient, of course, is cheese. The recipe calls for a Cheshire cheese or a Gloucester cheese. We're not using a Cheshire cheese. We couldn't find one that was like what we wanted, or in fact any Cheshire cheese in our modern markets. Today we're using a white cheddar, an English cheddar, and a Gloucester cheese. That was also mentioned. He mentions using a Parmesan cheese as a substitute. So that's a good possible cheese. The modern cheeses we have today tend to be softer than an 18th century cheese, which was harder. So keep that in mind. So I've grated up 1/2 pound of our English cheddar and 1/2 pound of our Gloucester cheese. We're gonna put this in a pan and now add just a 1/2 cup of white wine. Now we're gonna put this pan over a nice low fire. Now that our cheese is melted and it's kind of smooth, it's time to add our ingredients. I'm gonna start off with just a teaspoon here of mustard. Add to that 2 tablespoons of butter. And our last ingredient is 4 egg yolks beaten. So as we think about how to serve this, one of the first ways is to add a gill of cream while we're cooking it, and it creates a cheese fondue. And that's actually what they called it in the 18th century cookbook. Let's see how this one turns out. Very cheesy. This one is really excellent, just eating it like this. If you're using this as a dipping sauce, then you'll need to keep it warm. As it cools, it will begin to solidify. It'll still be spreadable, but it will solidify. Let's look at another way to serve this. Now the next way to serve these is to put our cheese sauce into these little pans or ramekins if you don't have a little pan like this. In fact, this recipe is called ramekins of cheese. The cheese sauce, as you cook it, is very oily. You definitely don't want to overfill these pans. Just half full is plenty. So these little dishes get put into the oven at 400 degrees. You can bake these or you can broil these, and you cook them until they get a nice little light brown color on the top, and then they're ready to serve to the table with little toasts. Just toasted is very good. Very, very good. You can see the oil does kind of separate and build up on this, but it still works out really nicely. I believe that the cheeses in the 18th century probably weren't as oily as the cheeses we have today, but this still works out so wonderful. It tastes great. Our third preparation uses toasts as well, but before I do that, I did want to show you what this mixture looks like once it cools down. It's still very spreadable. It's still soft enough you can work with it, but it does certainly stiffen up. This third preparation is very easy. We're just going to take this cooled cheese spread, place it on our toasts, and then we're going to put these in the oven, broil them until the cheese is a nice and bubbly brown. So here these are. They turned out great. This is a take on the Welsh rabbit dish that you'll have reference to. Sometimes there are variations of it. They might call it an English rabbit or the Irish rabbit or a Scots rabbit, but it's all very similar to the same thing. Cheese and mustard and wine and mixed up and put on the toasts like this. Let's see how this one turns out. Wow. Wonderful. Wonderful and cheesy. The wine comes in a little bit more on these, so you can really kind of taste that. I'm not sure why you can taste it in this version rather than the other ones, but I really think this is my favorite way to cook these, or to have this as a dish. It really is kind of the most set, ready to bring to the table kind of a way to eat it. This was really popular as a tavern dish in the 18th century, as well as something you'd bring in after the meal, as the very final finishing touch on your meal. This Welsh rabbit cooks very easily in a Dutch oven. In fact, he mentions it right there in the recipe. So this will work great at an event. It is really so easy and so fun to do, and they taste so great. Everything you've seen here in this episode, all these things are available on our website or in our print catalog. I want to really thank you out there for joining us today as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century. If you're new to our channel, I want to welcome you. You can subscribe by clicking the button right up here. Also check out our related videos. Thanks so much for watching.